Hi, welcome to Dark Knight Chronicles TV. Step into the shadows, where the ordinary becomes unsettling, and every glance over the fence might reveal more than you ever wanted to know. Tonight, we invite you into the heart of suburbia, a place where picket fences and friendly waves hide secrets that fester in the darkness. These are not just stories, they're warnings. 5 true tales of neighbors who watched, waited, and crossed the line between familiar and fear. If you enjoy unraveling the darkness with us, hit subscribe and join our growing community of true crime and mystery lovers. Your thoughts and theories matter. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think really happened. Every week, we dive into the shadows, and tonight, those shadows are closer than you think. Now, lock your doors, close the blinds, and listen closely, because sometimes the greatest horror isn't what's out there, it's who lives next door. Marigold Lane was the picture of suburban tranquility, a neighborhood where sunlight gently bathed manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. It was the kind of place where children rode bikes freely and families gathered for weekend barbecues, creating an atmosphere of trust and camaraderie. Rachel and David Pollard had searched for months to find a community like this, safe, friendly, perfect for raising their young daughter, Emily. The day they moved in was filled with cheerful greetings and friendly waves. Among the welcoming neighbors stood Mr. Mallory, a solitary figure who observed from his porch. Older, with thinning white hair and pale eyes that seemed to pierce through the facade of pleasantries, he gave Rachel an uneasy feeling. Still, she dismissed it, convincing herself that he was merely shy or introverted. Yet as days became weeks, Rachel's discomfort grew. Mr. Mallory was ever present, always lingering at the edge of her awareness. She would often catch glimpses of him standing motionless at his window or observing silently from his garden. Initially, she attributed it to coincidence or curiosity, the natural interest of an elderly neighbor. But soon, his persistent gaze began to feel invasive, more intentional. When Rachel tried to make conversation, Mr. Mallory's reactions were minimal. Nods or brief gestures. He never spoke, and his eyes always held an unsettling intensity that sent chills through her spine. Rachel mentioned her discomfort to David, who reassured her it was likely harmless eccentricity, nothing to fear. One morning, Rachel found an unexpected gift on their doorstep, a bouquet of lilies tied neatly with ribbon. There was no card, no indication of who had sent them. The gifts kept appearing, each progressively more personal. A handmade blanket, a box of chocolates, her favorite brand of perfume. Rachel's unease intensified. She couldn't prove it, but she felt certain Mr. Mallory was behind these unsettling gestures. Her fears heightened dramatically one night when she heard scratching outside her window. Trembling, Rachel peered through the curtain. Mr. Mallory stood motionless at the edge of her garden, illuminated only by moonlight, staring directly at her house. Her pulse quickened as fear took hold, paralyzing her momentarily. Gathering her courage, she immediately called David, who was out of town on business. Upon his return, David confronted Mr. Mallory. The elderly man's reaction was chilling, silent, emotionless, and unyielding. He simply turned away, retreating into his home without explanation or acknowledgement. David finally acknowledged Rachel's concerns, and together they decided to install security cameras. The footage they captured over the following nights confirmed Rachel's worst suspicions. Mr. Mallory repeatedly loitered near their property, pacing near their fence and peering into their windows. The tension in the Pollard household became unbearable, their sense of safety shattered entirely. Their nightmare reached its peak one rainy afternoon when their daughter Emily disappeared. Rachel's panic consumed her as she searched frantically, involving neighbors and the police in a desperate, exhaustive hunt. Hours passed in agonizing suspense until Emily was found, frightened but safe, hiding in a neighbor's shed. "The old man told me to stay quiet," Emily whispered, her small voice shaking. Police questioned Mr. Mallory rigorously, yet found no evidence directly linking him to any wrongdoing. With no tangible proof, authorities could take no action. Deeply unsettled and unwilling to risk further danger, Rachel and David quickly decided to leave Marigold Lane. On moving day, as they packed the last of their belongings, Rachel couldn't help but glance toward Mr. Mallory's home one final time. He stood silently at his window, pale eyes locked on hers, an image that would haunt her forever. Even years later, Rachel found herself glancing nervously over her shoulder, haunted by the memory of her silent stalker. Marigold Lane, once a symbol of safety and community, became a chilling reminder to Rachel that darkness could lurk behind any facade. The true horror, she realized, was not only Mr. Mallory's unsettling presence, but the fragile illusion of security she had once believed in, a security now irrevocably shattered by the silent watcher next door. Willow Creek Estates was known for its serenity, a quiet cluster of homes nestled against a dense forest that whispered secrets in the wind. The Granger family, eager to escape the noise and chaos of urban life, thought they had discovered their dream home in this picturesque haven. With its charming architecture and peaceful surroundings, it seemed an ideal place to raise their young son, Ethan. Their neighbor, Mrs. Platt, was the first to greet them, arriving on their doorstep bearing a freshly baked pie and a warm smile. Yet beneath her friendliness was a subtle warning. "Be careful what you say," she whispered cryptically, glancing nervously toward the thick hedges dividing their yards. The Grangers brushed off her warning, assuming she meant harmless neighborhood gossip. But soon after their arrival, unsettling events began unfolding. Ethan started to experience nightmares, frequently waking in tears, speaking incoherently about the whispering man who stood just beyond the fence. Initially, his parents dismissed these episodes as products of his active imagination, adjusting to a new environment. But Ethan's distress grew increasingly intense, leaving them concerned and confused. Strange occurrences extended beyond Ethan's nightmares. Items began appearing inexplicably in their backyard. A child's shoe, an antique pocket watch, handwritten notes scrawled with eerie messages. "We see you," "You're not alone," and "Stay quiet." The family installed security lights and locks, yet their unease continued to escalate. Late one evening, Mrs. Granger stayed awake, determined to identify the source of the disturbances. Peering through the curtains, she noticed shadowy figures along the fence line, swaying slightly in the moonlight. The figures stood silently, their indistinct forms partially hidden by darkness. Heart pounding, she stepped outside bravely, calling out a challenge. The figures didn't move, but dissolved quietly into the shadows, leaving only the rustling leaves behind. Their sense of security eroded further when Ethan began refusing to play outside, terrified that the whispering figures would return. His parents felt trapped, their idyllic home transforming into a place of hidden menace. The Grangers confided in Mrs. Platt. Desperate for advice, she nodded gravely, confirming their fears. The forest holds secrets, and the whispers carry truths best left unknown. Resolving to uncover the truth themselves, Mr. and Mrs. Granger researched Willow Creek Estate's history, uncovering unsettling revelations. Decades earlier, the area was infamous for mysterious disappearances. Families vanished overnight without a trace, leaving behind eerie silence and empty homes. Records showed no clear explanations, only whispered theories of strange occurrences in the surrounding woods. Determined to end their torment, Mr. Granger installed surveillance cameras aimed at the fence line. Reviewing the footage one morning, his blood ran cold. The video revealed multiple shadowy figures standing silently for hours, swaying and murmuring incomprehensible words. Horrified, the Grangers reported the disturbing evidence to authorities, but investigations yielded no tangible results, no footprints, no signs of intrusion, nothing concrete. Feeling helpless, the family decided to leave Willow Creek Estates immediately, unwilling to risk further encounters with the unknown menace lurking beyond their fence. On their final night, as they packed hurriedly, Ethan whispered tearfully, "They say they'll follow us. They say they always do." Months later, In a new city far from Willow Creek, the Grangers tried to rebuild their lives. Yet sometimes late, at night, Ethan would wake, terrified, insisting the whispers had found them again, carried softly on the wind, a haunting reminder that some secrets refuse to remain hidden. Jenna Thomas had hoped for a fresh start. Newly divorced and seeking independence, she chose the quiet duplex on Cedar Avenue for its affordability and charm. The building stood quietly at the edge of town, shrouded by ancient oaks whose branches whispered gently against the windows. It was peaceful, exactly what Jenna needed. The landlord, Mr. Benson, assured her she'd love the community, yet he avoided discussing the attic apartment adjacent to hers. "It's seldom occupied," he muttered, quickly changing the subject. Jenna found it odd, but the excitement of her new beginning quickly overshadowed any fleeting doubts. Days passed, quietly, until Jenna first noticed signs of activity next door. Late at night, the floorboards creaked gently above her ceiling, accompanied by muted voices and occasional dragging noises. At first, Jenna attributed these sounds to typical apartment living. However, her curiosity grew stronger each passing night as the disturbances persisted. Her neighbor was a man named Mr. Hughes, rarely seen during daylight hours. Jenna caught occasional glimpses of him late in the evening, entering or leaving his apartment silently, always cloaked in shadows. Attempts to introduce herself were met with silence. Her knocks went unanswered, and her friendly notes slipped under his door were ignored. Odd occurrences escalated rapidly. Jenna began finding unfamiliar items near her door: a vintage locket, a worn leather wallet, photographs of people she had never met. Initially dismissing these discoveries as accidents or misplaced belongings, Jenna's apprehension grew when she realized each item appeared carefully placed, as if deliberately presented. One particularly unsettling night, Jenna awoke to muffled whispers drifting through the vent shared with Mr. Hughes's apartment. Pressing her ear against the grate, she heard several hushed voices urgently conversing, pleading even, but she could not discern the words clearly. Disturbed, Jenna called Mr. Benson, who dismissed her concerns as mere nightmares or imagination. Unable to shake her anxiety, Jenna explored her apartment more thoroughly, discovering a previously unnoticed trapdoor hidden in her bedroom closet ceiling. Her heart raced as realization dawned. The door led directly into the attic apartment. The idea of a concealed access point filled her with dread. Yet an irresistible curiosity compelled her to investigate further. One night, armed with a flashlight, Jenna bravely ascended the narrow ladder through the trapdoor. The attic apartment was eerily quiet, the air thick with dust and decay. The beam of her flashlight revealed cluttered stacks of boxes, antique furniture draped in white sheets, and rows of clothing racks filled with garments disturbingly familiar, items identical to those she owned. As she moved cautiously deeper into the room, Jenna's horror intensified. The apartment walls were covered with countless Polaroid photographs, each image capturing private moments from her life: her cooking dinner, watching television, sleeping. The sense of violation overwhelmed her, and panic surged through her veins. Suddenly, movement from the corner caught Jenna's attention. Turning sharply, her flashlight illuminated Mr. Hughes sitting silently among scattered audio recorders, each device replaying fragments of whispered conversations. He stared directly at her, eyes vacant yet somehow knowing, lips curled into an unsettling smile. "Welcome home," he whispered softly, the sound chillingly calm. Jenna bolted, adrenaline propelling her swiftly back down the ladder. She slammed the trapdoor shut, heart pounding violently, fear clouding her vision. Within days, she vacated the duplex, refusing to spend another moment near the haunting presence of Mr. Hughes. But despite escaping physically, Jenna could never fully escape the memories of that night. Each unfamiliar sound in her new home stirred deep anxiety. Occasionally, in the quiet hours before dawn, she swore she could still hear those same whispered voices, reminding her that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. Greg and Lisa Sanford had always dreamed of owning a home in a close-knit neighborhood, and when they finally bought their charming house in Brookside Court, they felt their dreams had come true. The cul-de-sac was idyllic, filled with friendly families and neatly manicured gardens. Their neighbors, Carl and Denise Harrison, who lived directly across the street, immediately welcomed them with open arms, bringing over homemade cookies and bottles of wine, along with enthusiastic offers to help with any settling-in issues. Initially, Greg and Lisa felt fortunate to have neighbors who seemed genuinely invested in their comfort and happiness. Carl and Denise were always available, always friendly, always smiling. But gradually, the Sanford couple began noticing little peculiarities that became increasingly unsettling. Carl and Denise seemed unusually informed about their daily routines. They would casually comment on Greg's morning jog routes or Lisa's weekly grocery trips. At first, Lisa rationalized it as neighborly attention, but soon their knowledge of her personal habits felt intrusive rather than friendly. Things escalated when Greg received a text from an unknown number reminding him to buy milk on his way home, exactly what Lisa had mentioned forgetting to buy that morning. The Sanfords brushed it off initially, joking uneasily about Carl and Denise's over-enthusiastic attentiveness. However, the unease lingered. As weeks passed, Carl and Denise became increasingly omnipresent. Greg frequently caught Carl taking photographs of their home. Denise would wander into their backyard without invitation, claiming she was checking on the flowers she had helped plant. Polite requests to respect their privacy were met with exaggerated apologies and promises, yet the intrusions continued. Feeling increasingly uncomfortable, Greg began asking other neighbors about the Harrisons. The responses were evasive. Neighbors spoke hesitantly, vaguely implying that Carl and Denise had a reputation for being overly friendly, sometimes disturbingly so. Whispers hinted that previous occupants of the Sanford house had moved abruptly, citing personal discomfort and unexplained disturbances. Determined to find concrete evidence of wrongdoing, Greg installed security cameras around their property. Reviewing the footage one evening, Greg felt chills crawl up his spine. The cameras captured Carl and Denise routinely lurking outside their windows late at night, peering into their home, testing door handles, and meticulously documenting their daily movements. Outraged and frightened, Greg confronted Carl and Denise. Their response was unnervingly calm and cheerful, brushing off his accusations as misunderstandings. Carl's casual assurance, "We're just keeping an eye out for you," did little to reassure Greg. It only heightened his paranoia. Tension culminated horribly one evening when Lisa vanished. Greg searched desperately, panic escalating until, driven by suspicion, he stormed across the street to confront Carl and Denise directly. Bursting into their home, he discovered Lisa tied up but unharmed in their basement. Carl and Denise, appearing bewildered, insisted that it was merely a playful misunderstanding, an innocent game taken too far. Police intervention provided little satisfaction. Carl and Denise vehemently maintained their innocence, claiming the Sanfords had misunderstood their intentions. With no substantial evidence of malicious intent beyond the disturbing surveillance footage, which Carl dismissed as misinterpreted, authorities issued warnings but pursued no further action. Feeling violated and unsafe, Greg and Lisa decided to leave Brookside Court immediately, unwilling to endure further psychological torment. On their final drive away, they couldn't help but notice Carl and Denise standing on their porch, smiling warmly, waving farewell as though bidding goodbye to old friends. Even years later, the Sanfords remained haunted by their experience, cautious about forming new relationships with neighbors. Occasionally, Lisa would glance nervously at unfamiliar faces in their new neighborhood, wondering if beneath those friendly smiles hid darker intentions, a chilling reminder of the friendly couple across the street who had shattered their sense of security forever. Maplewood Apartments had always been considered quiet, comfortable, and perfectly ordinary. It was an older building, full of character with brick walls, creaking wooden floors, and a comforting sense of history. Samantha Price chose apartment 14A precisely because of its vintage charm and proximity to her workplace. The landlord assured her the building was safe, the neighbors pleasant, and that she'd feel right at home. It wasn't long after moving in that Samantha first heard the rumors about apartment 14B. According to neighbors, no one had occupied the unit for years, not since the last tenant inexplicably vanished one night, leaving behind all their belongings untouched. Despite the eerie story, Samantha dismissed it as an urban legend designed to amuse newcomers. However, reality soon clashed with Samantha's skepticism. Strange occurrences began almost immediately. Despite supposedly being empty, lights in apartment 14B flickered on at odd hours, casting shifting shadows beneath its closed door. Sometimes, faint melodies and soft laughter drifted through the thin walls, unsettling Samantha during the quiet hours of night. Curiosity quickly morphed into unease when Samantha noticed other tenants avoided discussing apartment 14B, exchanging anxious glances whenever she mentioned the peculiar activity. Her discomfort deepened each night as she lay awake, listening intently to muffled conversations and inexplicable footsteps emanating from the neighboring apartment. Determined to confront her fears, Samantha approached the building manager. His reaction was dismissive, attributing her experiences to the building's old pipes and wiring, or perhaps echoes from neighboring apartments. Yet Samantha remained unconvinced, certain there was something more sinister happening behind the locked door of apartment 14B. One restless evening, driven by insatiable curiosity and growing dread, Samantha quietly approached apartment 14B's door. Heart pounding, she pressed her ear against the wood, catching fragments of hushed conversation and childish giggles. She hesitantly tested the doorknob, shocked when it turned effortlessly beneath her grasp. The apartment was pristine inside, meticulously maintained despite its supposed abandonment. Rows of Polaroid photographs covered the walls, each image capturing mundane yet intimate moments of Maplewood residents, neighbors sleeping, dining, watching television, completely unaware of being observed. At the center of the room stood a small, antique table adorned with candles, their wax pooling in elaborate patterns and handwritten notes scattered haphazardly across its surface. Samantha's stomach churned with dread as she realized each note bore intimate details about residents' private lives, including her own. A chilling voice broke the silence behind her. "I've been waiting for you," it whispered gently. Turning abruptly, Samantha faced a man she'd never seen before, his presence disturbingly calm. He stood silently in the shadows, his eyes gleaming with eerie recognition and unsettling familiarity. "I watch over everyone here," he continued softly. "Someone has to keep them safe." Samantha's fear overwhelmed her, propelling her from the apartment in blind panic. She fled back to her unit, locking the door behind her, heart racing uncontrollably. Sleep eluded her entirely that night as she replayed the terrifying encounter repeatedly in her mind. The next morning, she vacated Maplewood Apartments hastily, leaving behind everything she couldn't carry. Despite settling far away, the memory of apartment 14B remained vivid, haunting her daily. Every flicker of an unfamiliar light or whispering voice reignited her terror, a constant reminder of the mysteries she'd uncovered and the unseen watcher who remained hidden within Maplewood Apartments' unsettling silence. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with us tonight. If these stories made you look twice at your own neighbors, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a comment with your creepiest neighbor story, and join our community of true crime and horror lovers. Because in the world of Dark Knight Chronicles TV, every door hides a secret, and every window holds a watcher. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, real fear lives next door.